The corridor stank of scorched wiring and hot oil. The ship moaned around them, a living thing dying in pieces, and every few heartbeats the deck trembled with another distant impact, like thunder trapped in a metal cage. Anakin Skywalker's arms ached from the fight, from dragging Obi-Wan Kenobi's weight, from holding himself upright against the ruin of everything that should have been simple. Count Dooku knelt in the wreckage as if the galaxy had finally bowed him, his severed wrists cauterized and smoking, his face pale but still arranged into that aristocratic mask, contempt dressed as composure. Sheev Palpatine sat strapped to the chair they had torn loose from its rails, the Chancellor's hands bound, his breath ragged, but his eyes bright as polished stones. The old man looked almost small against the machinery and the smoke, and yet every time Anakin met that gaze, something in him tightened. A pressure behind the ribs, a whisper behind the teeth. Do it. He's too dangerous to be left alive, Palpatine said softly, as if offering counsel to a frightened boy, and not issuing a verdict on a fallen titan. Anakin's blue blade hovered at Dooku's throat. The world narrowed to the hum and the heat, and the faint metallic taste of fear. He heard Obi-Wan's voice in memory, steady, patient, always pulling him back from the cliff's edge. He heard Dooku's laughter from Geonosis. He saw dead clones, burned armor, eyes staring. He saw his mother's face, the sand, the blood. I shouldn't, Anakin whispered, but the words were thin. The ship shuddered again. Somewhere, something screamed. Metal, not human. Dooku lifted his chin a fraction. Skywalker, he said, and there was something like regret in it, quickly smothered. You have no idea what you are. The blade moved. It was too fast for thought. 2 clean arcs, crossing, final .e. Dooku's head rolled into the grime, the expression still half-formed, surprise caught forever between dignity and disbelief. For a heartbeat, Anakin felt nothing at all. Then the Force convulsed. It was like plunging into icy water, like a sudden vacuum in the lungs, and something dark, ancient, eager, surged up to meet him. His hands trembled, not from fatigue now, but from a wave that had nothing to do with the ship. Palpatine's bound shoulders relaxed, just slightly, as if a knot had been untied in the universe. Anakin stared at what he had done, and the hum of his lightsaber sounded suddenly like a heartbeat that wasn't his. The ship began to list, an immense slow roll that turned doors into walls and walls into ceilings. Anakin caught Obi-Wan before he slid, grunting as he dragged his former master across the deck. Obi-Wan's face was slack with unconsciousness, the bruise blooming along his jaw like storm clouds on pale skin. Anakin told himself the man would wake, would scold him, would pull him back into the light with a single dry remark. Palpatine limped at his side, one hand gripping Anakin's forearm with surprising strength. The old man's fingernails bit through the soot on Anakin's glove. You did what you had to, he murmured, and his voice threaded into the tight place inside Anakin's chest, soothing and poisonous in the same breath. A decisive Jedi. The Council would have hesitated. The Republic cannot afford hesitation. Anakin's stomach turned. He could still feel the moment his blades crossed, the resistance, then the absence. He had expected triumph to taste like something. It tasted like ash. They reached the wrecked bridge, where the Separatist crew lay scattered, and beyond, through a jagged opening, Coruscant glittered in the distance, impossibly serene. A planet of light and towers and traffic lanes, hanging there as if it had never known war. Clone pilots in white helmets worked the controls of a Republic shuttle clamped to the hull, their movements sharp with urgency. One of them looked back, just a brief tilt of visor toward Anakin. And for an instant, Anakin had the strangest sensation that something invisible had passed between them, like static on skin. A tremor rippled through the air. Not the ship this time, but something subtler, a pressure wave in the Force. The clones froze for a fraction of a second, then resumed their motions, each of them a hair too precise, as if following a rhythm they had always obeyed but never noticed. Anakin's throat tightened. He wanted to ask, "Are you all right?" But the words stuck. He shoved Obi-Wan into the shuttle, strapped him down, felt Palpatine's gaze on him like a hand at the back of his neck. As the shuttle detached and the dying ship fell away beneath them, Coruscant swelled in the viewport, a jeweled fortress. The traffic lanes looked like luminous rivers. The Senate district's spires rose like cathedral towers. It should have been beautiful. Anakin could not stop seeing Dooku's head in the grime. Rain washed Coruscant in thin silver sheets, blurring the lights into smeared halos. The landing platform was slick, the surface dark as a riverstone, and clone troopers stood in formation beneath the downpour, their armor glistening like bone. Anakin stepped down first, breath steaming faintly in the cold air. The rain found every crack in his tunic, slid down his wrists, cooled the lingering heat of battle. He welcomed it like penance. For a moment, the city's soundscape pressed in. Distant engines, muted voices, the sigh of wind around towers, and it felt like stepping into another lifetime. Palpatine emerged behind him, cloak heavy and dripping, the Chancellor's face lined and weary. He looked every bit the rescued statesman, the beloved leader who had endured captivity. The troopers snapped to attention. Their obedience was immediate, absolute. The Republic made men who moved like pieces on a board, and the board was always larger than any one player. A pair of medics lifted Obi-Wan Kenobi's stretcher. Anakin walked alongside, watching Obi-Wan's chest rise and fall, as if monitoring that simple motion could anchor the galaxy. Palpatine drifted near, always near. "Your actions today saved us all," Palpatine said, low enough that only Anakin could hear. "The Council will praise you publicly, perhaps. Privately, they will fear you. They fear power they cannot control." Anakin flinched. The rain sounded louder. Somewhere, in the ranks of the Coruscant Guard, a clone shifted, helmet turning a fraction toward Palpatine. It was nothing, just a soldier adjusting his stance. Yet Anakin's nerves prickled as if the air had cracked. The Chancellor's aides appeared, Maz Amedda's long face pinched with relief, attendants with umbrellas that snapped open like black wings. Palpatine let himself be shepherded, but his gaze never left Anakin's. "Rest," he said. "You have carried a heavy burden. You deserve understanding." Understanding. As if the universe could be talked into forgiving what had been done. Anakin watched the troopers march, heard their boots strike in clean unison, and wondered, absurdly, what it would look like if that unison broke. If a single note in the march faltered. If the Republic's perfect instrument turned, not in chaos, but in judgment. The thought was gone as quickly as it came, swallowed by the bright labyrinth of Coruscant. Yet it left a residue, like a prophecy you didn't realize you'd heard. The council chamber smelled of rain carried in on robes and wind, of polished stone and old incense. Coruscant's storm clouds pressed against the tall windows like gray hands, and the city lights beyond made the clouds glow from below, as if the planet itself was burning quietly. Mace Windu stood with his hands behind his back, the posture of a man who refused to be moved. His dark eyes were fixed on the doors, as if he could will the person on the other side to arrive already guilty. Grand Master Yoda sat at the center, small in body, immense in presence. His ears twitched, and his eyes, ancient and bright, seemed to watch something no one else could see. "Back. Skywalker has come," Ki-Adi-Mundi said, his voice carrying that clipped Syrian cadence. "With the Chancellor. And with blood on his hands," Mace said quietly. Plo Koon's mask hid his expression, but his voice was gentle. "We cannot condemn without hearing." Mace did not look away. "We have been hearing for years. The Chancellor gathers power like a man gathering knives. Every day the war continues, his authority grows. Every day, the Senate applauds the loss of their own voice." "Nay." Shakti's montrals angled forward, attentive. "The clones," she said softly. "They have become the spine of the Republic. If the spine breaks..." Yoda's fingers tightened on his cane. Break it may. Bent. Already is. He closed his eyes. The force moved around him like a deep tide. A shadow. Long it has been. Now, it thrashes. Macy's jaw clenched. We should have acted sooner. Yoda opened his eyes. For an instant, the old master looked almost weary. Acting without seeing, dangerous it is. A whisper brushed the edge of Yoda's mind, so faint he could have mistaken it for the wind. A voice he had not heard aloud in years, not in the crude sense of sound, but in the quiet place between heartbeats. Let go, the voice seemed to say. Yoda's breath caught. Qui-Gon Jinn. A memory and a presence braided together. Mace noticed the shift. Master. Yoda's eyes sharpened. Changed. Something has. A path. Split, it has. Outside, in the temple corridors, clone troopers stood at their posts, armor gleaming under the lamps. They looked the same as always. Yet in the Force, Yoda felt a new tension running through them. Like a bowstring drawn, not toward the Jedi, but toward something else. Kamino's storms never truly ended. They only shifted from one kind of fury to another. The rain hammered the platforms, and the sea below roared with blind persistence, as if trying to climb up and claim what the Kaminoans had stolen from it. Inside the sterile glow of Tipoca City, Chief Medical Scientist Nala moved with a precision that bordered on ritual. Her long neck bent over the medical pod, where a biochip floated in pale blue suspension, small as a fingernail, innocent as a seed. Lama Su watched with his hands clasped behind him, his expression the smooth calm of a man who had signed too many contracts to feel surprise. The reports from Coruscant, he said, voice controlled. General Skywalker executed Count Dooku. Nalisa did not look up. An escalation, she murmured. A necessary one, Lama Su replied. Necessary things break, Nalisi said, and there was something like contempt in the way she spoke, so faint it might have been imagination. She gestured, and a holographic schematic bloomed above the pod. The chip's lattice of control pathways, the neural interface designed to nest behind a clone's ear. A small anomaly pulsed near the center, not a flaw in manufacturing, a flaw in logic. It was supposed to be dormant until activated, Nalisi said. Yet there is signal activity, minimal, like a creature stirring in its sleep. Lamasu's eyes narrowed. You are suggesting outside interference. I am suggesting, Nalisi replied, that whoever demanded these chips wanted more than obedience. A younger technician hovered nearby, hands trembling just slightly as she adjusted the display. Her name tag read Kosai, though she kept her eyes lowered, as if afraid the wrong glance might be recorded. Nalisi's fingers traced the anomaly's branching pathways. The chip contained contingencies, layers of commands buried beneath commands. Some were obvious: behavioral compliance, loyalty, reinforcement. Others were encoded in a language of triggers and counter-triggers, like a lock built inside another lock. At the deepest layer, a protocol she had never seen documented flared briefly, then vanished. Threat. Identification, it whispered in her mind. Enemy categorization dawned. It was not designed to recognize Jedi. It was designed to recognize something older. Lamasu's voice sharpened. Who has access to this level of... Nalisi's eyes flicked toward him, and for once her mask cracked. We do not ask that question, Prime Minister. We survive by pretending the answers do not exist. No, Nanki. Kosai swallowed. In the corner of the lab, a comm terminal blinked, a secure line, coded for Republic oversight. Her gaze darted toward it, then away, then back again, like a trapped animal staring at an open gate. Outside, the storm raged. Inside, a seed of betrayal began to germinate. Commander Fox hated the rain, though he rarely allowed himself the luxury of naming why. Rain made armor heavier. Rain made comms hiss. Rain made Coruscant smell faintly of rust, as if the city's bones were bleeding. He stood beneath an archway near the Chancellor's private entrance to the Senate, visor tucked under his arm, water dripping from the edge of his pauldron. The lamps along the corridor burned steady, warm as torchlight, turning the wet stone a deep amber. It almost felt ancient, like a palace from a different age, except every surface carried the hum of power and surveillance. A courier had pressed a data chip into Fox's glove with the quick desperation of a man delivering poison. The courier had not spoken. He had only looked at Fox, eyes wide, too human in a place that demanded obedience, and vanished into the flow of guards. Fox slid the chip into a private reader. A single file opened, stripped of headers, embedded with Kaminoan encryption. The first thing he saw was a name he had tried to bury, CT 5555. Fives. Fox's mouth went dry. He remembered Fives on the floor of the barracks, blaster in hand, eyes wild with truth and terror. He remembered the order to stop him. He remembered the moment his own finger tightened, the bolt that hit Fives' chest, the way the ARC trooper had looked almost relieved as he died. The file contained fragments, medical readings, chip schematics, a warning written in clipped Kaminoan Basic. The warning was not about Jedi treason. It was about an override. A hidden protocol. A trigger that could turn the entire army into a single weapon aimed at a single target. Fox's breath slowed. His training told him to report this immediately up the chain, through the Chancellor's office, through the same channels that had ordered him to silence Fives. A strange sensation crawled along the back of his skull, like a cold hand behind his ear. His vision blurred for a heartbeat. Not from the rain. A list of faces flashed in his mind. Impossible, like a dream intruding on waking. Jedi he had seen in passing. Senators. Clones. And then, with a sharpness that made his teeth ache, the image of the Chancellor himself, Sheev Palpatine, smiling that private smile. Threat. Vector. Something inside Fox seemed to label it. Fox staggered, catching himself against the stone. One of his troopers shifted. Commander? Fox forced his voice steady. I'm fine. He was not. The chip behind his ear, quiet as a prayer since the day he'd been decanted, felt suddenly awake. He looked toward the Chancellor's entrance, where guards stood like statues, and wondered, with a clarity that terrified him, whether his loyalty had been hijacked from the beginning. The apartment was quiet in the way only Coruscant could be quiet. Never silent, only muffled by distance and glass. The rain traced crooked paths down the windows, distorting the city lights into wavering flames. Somewhere far below, speeders hissed past like unseen rivers. Padme sat wrapped in a soft robe, her hair unbound, the senator's armor of composure set aside for the night. She took Anakin's hands and guided them to her stomach. His palms were still rough with fresh blisters, still carrying the faint smell of smoke. Feel, she whispered. He felt. A flutter, delicate and real, like a bird's heartbeat beneath skin. The sensation should have anchored him. Instead it opened him like a wound. His throat tightened. I killed him, he said, and the words fell between them like a dropped knife. Count Dooku. He was unarmed. Padme's fingers tightened around his. You saved the Chancellor. You ended the war faster. They'll say what they always say. Anakin interrupted, too sharp, and immediately regretted it. He dragged in a breath. I didn't do it for the war. I did it because he told me to. No. She studied his face, and her eyes softened with fear and love in equal measure. Who told you? Anakin hesitated. He saw Palpatine smile. Heard the old man's voice in the smoke. You did what you had to. The Chancellor, he admitted. Padme's expression flickered. She had spent years in the Senate, learning how power wore its masks. Anakin, she said carefully. He shouldn't have asked that of you. Anakin stared at their joined hands. His fingers trembled. He wanted to confess everything. His dreams of her dying, the panic that gnawed at him, the way the future seemed like a trap closing. He wanted to be the man she believed he was. Instead, he felt like a blade held too tight. Outside, lightning flashed, and for a moment the room was starkly lit. Anakin thought of clones standing in rain, helmets tilted toward a voice in their heads. He thought of obedience. He thought of how easy it was to confuse duty with surrender. Padme leaned forward, forehead touching his. "Whatever you're carrying," she murmured, "don't carry it alone." Anakin closed his eyes. In the darkness behind his eyelids, Dooku's head rolled again. The opera house smelled of perfume and old stone, of expensive fabrics warmed by bodies that had never known hunger. The music was not music so much as a vibration that crawled into bone, a strange alien lament that made the heart feel too large for the chest. Anakin sat beside Palpatine in the private box, hands clasped tight enough to whiten his knuckles. The Chancellor's presence filled the space like a heavy cloak, familiar and suffocating. Down below, the performance unfolded in a wash of light and movement. Shimmering figures, masks, a story of desire and betrayal acted out in gestures, grand enough to be seen from the highest tier. Anakin watched without seeing. He was aware of Palpatine's mouth near his ear, the old man's voice threading through the music like a serpent through grass. "Did you ever hear?" Palpatine murmured. "The tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise?" Anakin's shoulders stiffened. The name carried a chill, as if the syllables were carved from deep water. "No." Palpatine's smile was small, private. "It's not a story the Jedi would tell you. Plagueis was a dark lord of the Sith, so powerful and so wise he could influence the midichlorians to create life. He had such a knowledge of the dark side that he could keep the ones he cared about from dying." The air felt thinner. Anakin's pulse thudded loud in his ears. Images flashed. Padme on a cold bed, eyes glassy, his hands useless. He swallowed. "The dark side is a pathway to many abilities some consider unnatural," Palpatine continued, his voice honeyed. "What if I told you there are secrets the Jedi keep from you? Secrets that could save your wife?" "Maybe." Anakin's breath caught, and he hated himself for it. "The Jedi aren't allowed." "Allowed?" Palpatine echoed, amused. Such a small word for men who claim to serve life itself. Anakin's mind tore in two directions: loyalty to the order that had raised him, and the raw animal need to keep Padme alive. Palpatine's words slipped into that need like a key into a lock. Outside the box, a pair of clone guards stood at attention. Their helmets were angled forward, expressions hidden. Anakin wondered suddenly what they heard through their internal comms, what orders lived beneath their skulls. He wondered if they could hear this conversation, this poison poured so delicately. Palpatine leaned back, watching the stage. "To understand the great mystery," he said softly, "one must sometimes step beyond the rules that bind lesser men." Anakin stared at the performance below. Betrayal, tragedy, applause. He felt as if he were watching his own life acted out by strangers, and somewhere in the darkness behind the curtains, something waited to claim him. Night settled over the temple like a cloak, heavy and restless. The corridors quieted, but the Force did not. It moved with the uneasy churn of a storm tide, pulling at Yoda's awareness, whispering warnings in a language older than fear. Yoda knelt in a small meditation chamber, away from the council's formal seats. The air smelled of wax and dried herbs. Tiny lamps burned on the floor like offerings. He closed his eyes and let his breath slow until the world became a single point of stillness. In that stillness, he reached. Not outward, toward the chaos of Coruscant, but inward, into the deep currents where the living touched the luminous. A presence answered, hesitant at first, as if uncertain whether it was welcome. Yoda's eyes snapped open. In the dimness, the faint outline of a man took shape, not fully formed, more suggestion than body. A tall figure, hair loose, expression calm and sad all at once. The light around him was gentle, like moonlight on water. "Qui-Gon," Yoda breathed, disbelief and relief tangled together. The presence smiled, and though no sound came, Yoda felt the warmth of it. "You are late," the smile seemed to say. "But you came. Changed. The future has," Yoda whispered. "A hinge it is, a door opening." And behind that door, Yoda sensed two paths. One slick with betrayal, Jedi falling beneath blaster fire. The other sharp with danger, but different. Clones turning not on the Jedi, but toward a dark heart at the center of the Republic. Qui-Gon's presence flickered, as if strained by effort. "Trust the living," the Force seemed to say through him. "Trust those made to obey. They will choose, if given a chance." Yoda's hands tightened on his knees. "The clones," he murmured. "Bound they are, bound by design." "Designed, yes," Qui-Gon's presence seemed to reply. "But design can fail." Yoda felt it then, a faint tremor running through the vast web of clone minds across the planet. A tension not of hostility toward the Jedi, but of awakening, like a sleeping beast rolling over. "They will act?" Yoda asked, voice barely a thread. Qui-Gon's presence dimmed, and for a moment the chamber felt colder. "They will be tested," came the impression. "And so will you." The lamps flickered. Outside, thunder rolled across Coruscant. Yoda bowed his head, small body heavy with the weight of unseen wars, and listened as the Force whispered that the game had changed, but the price of winning would not be light. Obi-Wan Kenobi woke with pain like a dull bell in his skull, and the bitter taste of Bacta clinging to his tongue. The temple's medbay lights were too bright. The ceiling seemed too far away. When he sat up, the room swayed, and for a moment he thought he was back on the invisible hand, the ship tilting into death. Anakin wasn't there. Mace Windu met him in the corridor outside, robes hanging heavy, expression carved from restraint. Yoda was with him, leaning on his cane, eyes half-lidded but alert. "You're fortunate to be alive," Mace said. Obi-Wan offered a faint smile. "I've been told I have a talent for inconvenient survival." Yoda's mouth twitched, but his gaze was distant, as if he were listening to a sound only he could hear. "Grievous," he said. "Found. He has been. Utapau." Obi-Wan's fatigue sharpened into focus. "Then we can end this." Mace's eyes narrowed. Perhaps that's what he wants." Before Obi-Wan could ask, Commander Cody approached, armor pristine despite the storm outside, helmet tucked neatly under his arm. The clone's face was calm in the practiced way of soldiers, but his eyes flicked toward Yoda with a subtle intensity, like a man waiting for permission to speak. "General Kenobi," Cody said, voice steady. "My men are ready." Obi-Wan nodded, grateful for the simplicity of it. There was comfort in the clean lines of duty. Go, fight, win, return. Yet even as he reached for that comfort, a faint unease stirred. He had fought beside clones long enough to feel their moods, the collective pulse of them. Tonight, that pulse felt strained, like a muscle held tight. Mace watched Cody for a beat too long. "Make your preparations," he said. "We'll send you as soon as transport is ready." Cody saluted and stepped away. As he did, his hand brushed briefly against the side of his head, near the spot where a chip lay hidden beneath skin, and his fingers lingered there a fraction longer than necessary. Obi-Wan's eyes narrowed. "Is something wrong with the troops?" Yoda's ears drooped slightly. "Wrong," he murmured. "Or right, hard to see." Mace's jaw tightened. "Anakin is spending too much time with the Chancellor. The Council believes the Chancellor may be involved with the Sith." "None. One." Obi-Wan's world tilted again, but this time it was not the ship. "That's absurd," he said automatically, and then his memories shifted. As Palpatine's influence on Anakin replayed in his mind, the word tasted less like certainty and more like denial. Mace's voice was quiet. "Nothing is absurd anymore." Obi-Wan looked down the corridor where clones stood guard, silent and motionless as statues, and wondered what kind of war waited on Utapau. because a different war was already growing here, in the heart of Coruscant. Palpatine's office in the Senate complex was warm despite the rain, warmed by hidden vents and the quiet hum of power. The walls were lined with art, ancient sculptures, tapestries translated into holographic texture, things chosen to suggest culture rather than conquest. A ruler who collected beauty could not surely be a monster. Masameda hovered near the desk, long fingers clasped. "The Senate is ready to hear you," he said. "They are relieved. They will be grateful," Palpatine finished, his tone mild. He turned from the window where he had been watching the storms drag their bellies across Coruscant's lights. In the glass, his reflection looked older, softer, almost frail. He liked that. People trusted frailty. They underestimated it. A hollow projector flared, casting blue light across his face. Reports scrolled. Utapau, Kashyyyk, the Outer Rim sieges. Numbers. Names. Lives arranged into columns. Palpatine's eyes moved over them with the detached interest of a man reviewing investments. Soon, he thought. Soon the game would close, the board swept clean. Outside his door, Commander Fox stood guard. Palpatine could feel the man's presence even through the thick durasteel. Fox was disciplined, efficient. A soldier shaped perfectly by fear and duty. A useful tool. And yet, a faint ripple touched Palpatine's senses. Not the Force itself, but a disturbance in something adjacent. Something engineered. A twitch in the machinery beneath the Republic's skin. Palpatine's eyes narrowed imperceptibly. He reached out, lightly, like fingers brushing a spider's web. The clones on Coruscant felt tense. Not the usual tension of guarding a building that contained the galaxy's politicians. This was different. Directional. Masameda continued speaking, unaware. "The Jedi Council has requested another meeting. They claim new intelligence." "They will come," Palpatine said, and smiled. "Let them." He moved to his desk and tapped a sequence into a secure console. Somewhere deep in the building, hidden relays responded, opening channels that were never meant to be seen. He would issue the command when the moment was ripe. The old beautiful trick, make the Jedi appear treasonous, then cut them down with their own army. Outside, Commander Fox swallowed hard, unseen. Palpatine did not know why, yet that the web had begun to tremble in the wrong direction. Anakin returned to the temple like a man coming back to a home he no longer recognized. The corridors were familiar, stone underfoot, the smell of old incense, the faint echo of distant training sabers, but tonight everything felt sharpened, as if the temple itself had grown edges. He walked alone, cloak damp at the hem from Coruscant's rain, hands clenched inside the folds of his sleeves. The words of the council replayed in his mind, each one a hook. "You must spy on the Chancellor. A Jedi does not spy. A Jedi obeys. A Jedi." He passed statues of old masters carved into the walls, their faces calm, their eyes stone-blind. He wondered what they would have said to him. He wondered if they had ever wanted something so badly it felt like drowning. At an intersection, a pair of temple guards stood watch, clones in white armor, their helmets reflecting the lamplight. Anakin nodded to them. They returned the gesture with perfect synchronization. He took 2 steps past them before something made him stop. A sound? No, Bai. A sensation. Like heat from a fire you didn't know was burning. He turned back. The clones' helmets were angled toward him now, a fraction. Not threatening, not curious. Waiting. Anakin's skin prickled. "Troopers?" he asked, attempting casual. One of them spoke, voice filtered, calm. "General Skywalker." The way he said it, like a label, like a designation, made Anakin's stomach knot. "Yes." A pause. A faint hiss of comms. "Are you? All right, sir?" The question was absurd in its normalcy, yet Anakin heard something beneath it, like the soldier was asking something else entirely. Are you with him? Are you with us? Do you know? Anakin forced a smile. I'm fine. The clones remained still. Then, as if satisfied, they resumed their forward-facing stance. Anakin walked on, but the unease followed him like a shadow. The clones were soldiers engineered for obedience. They did not ask questions unless permitted. They did not look at Jedi like that unless something had shifted. He remembered the moment on the invisible hand when the air had convulsed, when the Force had surged dark and cold. He remembered the brief, strange stillness in the clone pilots. Anakin's hand tightened around his lightsaber hilt. The temple's lamps flickered once, as if reacting to his fear. In the distance, thunder rolled over Coruscant, and the sound reminded him of artillery. He was standing in the heart of the Jedi Order, and for the first time in his life, he felt as if he did not know which army belonged to whom. The Senate chamber glittered with ceremony, a cathedral of politics. Floating pods drifted in slow arcs, each one carrying its own faction, its own color, its own ambition. Senators leaned forward like nobles at court, robes spilling like banners, voices rising and falling in practiced outrage and practiced devotion. Padme Amidala sat with her delegation, hands folded, face composed. Beneath the calm, her mind raced. Palpatine's power had expanded with every emergency vote, every crisis. The war had become a forge, and in its heat the Senate had softened, reshaped into something that no longer resembled a republic. Bail Organa caught her eye from across the chamber, his expression grave. No words were needed. They both felt the same cold truth. They were losing. Palpatine appeared at the central podium, moving slowly, as if the recent captivity still weighed on him. The chamber quieted. Relief swept through the senators like a sigh. Their savior had returned. Their familiar anchor. "My fellow senators," Palpatine began, voice amplified, warm and steady. "Today, our brave Jedi and our courageous clone soldiers have achieved a great victory. Count Dooku is dead. The separatist leadership is in disarray. We are closer than ever to peace." Applause surged. Clones lining the balconies stood motionless, armor shining under the chamber's lights. They looked like statues carved from the idea of loyalty. Padme watched those helmets. She thought of Anakin, his strained silence, his haunted eyes. She thought of the clones as men, not machines, and wondered what it meant that the Republic's most devoted servants had never been allowed a voice in the matter of how they were used. Palpatine continued, and his tone shifted subtly, like a blade sliding free. "However," he said, "the enemy does not only attack us from without. There are forces within our own institutions who would see the Republic weakened, who would seize control in the name of righteousness." The applause faded into murmurs. Padme's spine stiffened. Bail Organa's jaw tightened. Palpatine's eyes swept the chamber, and for a moment, Padme felt certain he was looking directly at her. "In these trying times," he said, "we must remain vigilant. We must ensure that no one, not even those we trust, can undermine the will of the people." Padme's hands tightened in her lap. The will of the people. Spoken by a man who had made the people irrelevant. Above, a clone shifted, a tiny movement that drew her attention. The trooper's helmet angled toward the Chancellor's podium, just slightly, as if listening to something beyond the sound of the voice. Padme's breath caught. For the first time, she saw the clones not as symbols, but as a line of loaded weapons, waiting for the word that would tell them where to point. The message reached Anakin like a punch. The council had moved. Mace Windu had gone to confront the Chancellor. Anakin left the temple without thinking, without permission, without the careful mask he wore for masters who did not trust him. Coruscant's rain hit him in sheets, cold against his face, soaking his cloak until it clung like a second skin. He moved through the city's layered walkways and underpasses with the urgency of a man chasing a falling star. His mind screamed. The Chancellor is the Sith. Mace will kill him. The Senate will turn on the Jedi. Padme will be... No, not that. Don't think it. Speeders roared past, spraying water into the air. Neon lights bled color onto wet stone. The towers rose above him like the spines of some enormous creature, and lightning flashed between them, illuminating everything in stark, brutal clarity. Clones patrolled the avenues near the Senate complex, white armor stark against the darkness. As Anakin ran, their helmets turned to follow him, one after another, like flowers tracking a sun. He slowed, startled, then forced himself onward. They did not stop him. They did not question him. They simply watched. He could feel something in the air, an undercurrent humming beneath the storm. It reminded him of the moment after Dooku's execution, of that cold surge, that sense that a line had been crossed and the universe had noticed. He reached the Senate complex, water streaming from his hair. The entrance corridors were guarded by Coruscant troops in red-marked armor. Commander Fox stood among them, his posture rigid, his eyes fixed on Anakin with something unreadable. "General Skywalker," Fox said. His voice was steady, but his face looked pale beneath the harsh lights. Anakin barely registered the salute. "Where is he?" Fox hesitated, just a fraction. "In his office. Master Windu and 3 Jedi entered minutes ago." Anakin's stomach dropped. He could already feel it now. The violence coiled above, like thunder gathering inside a room. As he moved toward the lift, Fox's hand rose, then fell. The commander's fingers trembled. Anakin caught it, that tiny betrayal of discipline. And in that moment he saw Fox not as an extension of the Republic's will, but as a man bracing against something inside his own skull. Anakin stepped into the lift. The doors sealed. The ascent began. Above him in the Chancellor's tower, the Force roared like a storm about to break. Sheev Palpatine's office was quiet, the kind of quiet that felt staged. The city's noise was muffled behind thick, transparent steel. Rain slid down the window in slow, patient lines. The room was lit by soft amber lamps that made everything look warmer than it should have been. Mace Windu stood at the center like a blade planted in stone. Kit Fisto flanked him, calm and ready. Agent Kohler and CC-10 held the doorway, their faces set with grim purpose. "The Senate will decide your fate," Mace said, voice controlled, every syllable a restraint. "You are under arrest, Chancellor." Palpatine's eyes widened slightly. "Arrest?" he echoed. And then he smiled, and the smile was wrong. It did not touch his eyes. "On what charge?" Mace did not blink. "You are a Sith Lord." For a heartbeat, the room froze. Then Palpatine laughed. It was not the gentle chuckle of a politician amused by an overreach. It was a dry, delighted sound, like a man hearing the punchline to a joke he had been telling for decades. "Well?" Palpatine said, and his voice changed, subtle but unmistakable. The warmth drained away, leaving something sharp. "If you have the courage to say it aloud, then we are very near the end." Kit Fisto's hand moved to his saber. "Surrender," he said. Palpatine's expression softened into mock pity. "I am afraid," he murmured, "that surrender is not in my nature." The air thickened. The lamps flickered. Mace felt the Force tighten around them, not like a tide but like a noose. Palpatine's hand shot out. The blade that erupted from his sleeve was not hidden metal but pure red light, igniting with a hiss that sounded like hatred given breath. He moved faster than should have been possible for an old man, a blur of robes and violence. Agent Kohler fell first, throat open before his eyes could widen. CZ-10 barely brought his saber up before Palpatine's red arc carved through him. Kit Fisto met Palpatine's onslaught with a fierce grace, green blade flashing. But Palpatine's speed was a storm, and storms did not tire. Mace Windu ignited his purple blade, stepping into the chaos with the cold precision of a man who had accepted death as a price. Sparks flew as sabers met. The room filled with the scent of ozone and burning cloth. Palpatine's face twisted, the mask slipping. His eyes burned, not with anger, but with joy. "You are all going to die," he hissed. Mace gritted his teeth and drove forward, saber locked against saber, and thought, if the Republic is to survive, this monster must fall here, in this room, before his poison reaches the rest of the galaxy. Outside the office, beyond the sealed doors, clone boots began to move, drawn by an order no one had spoken aloud yet, but which was already waking inside their blood. Fisto's body hit the floor with a sound that seemed too heavy for such a fluid fighter. The green blade sputtered and died. The room was a ruin now. Furniture splintered, drapes scorched, the air thick with smoke, and the metallic tang of blood. Only two remained standing. Mace Windu's chest rose and fell in controlled breaths. His robe was torn at the hem, burned at one sleeve. His eyes were hard, focused, the calm of a man balancing on a razor. Palpatine stood near the window, shoulders heaving, red saber still humming. The old man's face was no longer the kindly mask the Senate adored. It was twisted with strain and fury, the skin around his eyes tight, his lips peeled back slightly as if he could not fully hide the animal beneath. "You have lost," Mace said, voice low. "The Jedi will not be destroyed by your schemes." Palpatine's laugh was ragged. "Destroyed," he spat. No, Master Windu, not by my schemes." He reached toward his desk console, fingers trembling with excitement. A holographic projector flared to life, bathing his hand in cold light. Mace's eyes narrowed. He sensed it, an immense channel opening, connecting Palpatine's will to something far away, something vast. Palpatine's voice dropped, intimate, triumphant. "It will be done," he whispered into the holocom. And then, with a deliberate savoring of each syllable, he spoke the phrase that had been waiting in the Republic's bones. "Execute Order 66. The words hung in the air like a curse. Mace felt the Force shudder. Not like a wave, not like an explosion, like a million tiny locks clicking open at once. Palpatine's eyes gleamed. He turned back toward Mace, raising his free hand, and lightning erupted. Blue-white bolts that filled the room with screaming light. Mace brought his blade up, catching the lightning, redirecting it, the purple glow warping into brilliance. The energy hammered against him, burning his arms, pushing him backward toward the window. Palpatine leaned into it, teeth bared, voice rising into a cackle. "Power," he snarled. "Unlimited power." Outside, in the corridors of the Senate complex, thousands of clone troopers stiffened. Inside their skulls, the chips awakened fully for the first time. And something buried deeper than the command itself, turned its attention, not toward the Jedi, but toward the voice that had spoken the curse. Commander Fox felt the command like a nail driven into the back of his mind. Order 66. For a heartbeat, the world sharpened into a single instruction. Targets. Threats. Jediite. His body wanted to move. His muscles tightened, ready to obey, as naturally as breathing. He had obeyed all his life. The Republic had built him for this. Then the deeper layer flared. A second signal, colder, cleaner, cut through the first like a blade through cloth. The first command did not vanish. It remained, pulsing, demanding. But now it competed with something else, something that felt older than any war. Threat identification, enemy classification, primary infiltrator. Fox's visor display, internal, invisible to anyone else, flickered. A symbol appeared, a red mark over a stylized crest. Chancellor Darth. Fox's breath caught so hard his ribs hurt. Around him, Coruscant Guard troopers moved in sudden unison, their boots striking the corridor like a drumbeat. They raised their blasters, not toward the temple, not toward the council, but toward the Chancellor's private lift. One trooper's voice crackled in Fox's ear. "Commander, confirm target." Fox's mouth went dry. Every rule, every drilled instinct, every chain of command screamed at him to deny what he was seeing. To override. To report to the Chancellor. To protect the Republic symbol. But the chip did not care about symbols. It cared about threats. Fox swallowed and felt, in a sudden flash, the memory of Five's dying eyes. The ARC trooper had tried to warn them. Fox had been the weapon used to silence truth. Now truth had returned, and had lived inside Fox's own skull. "Confirm," Fox said, and his voice sounded like someone else's. "Proceed to intercept. Non-lethal if possible." Non-lethal. As if that mattered now. The lift doors opened. Troopers flooded in, armor gleaming under the cold lights, blasters held tight, muzzles steady. Fox stepped in last, feeling the chip's pressure like a hand between his shoulder blades. As the lift rose, Fox stared at his own reflection in the glossy surface. For a moment, he did not look like a soldier. He looked like an executioner. Then he thought, fiercely, not execution. Arrest. The Republic had been built on law. If law meant anything, it meant the man at the top could be held accountable. The lift chimed. Doors lit open. Lightning crackled from within the office. And Fox realized, with a sick certainty, that the Chancellor's mask was already off. The office doors slid open and the room vomited heat. Fox stepped through smoke and the stench of scorched fabric, blaster raised, and saw the impossible. Mace Windu at the window, saber angled to catch a torrent of lightning, and Sheev Palpatine, no longer frail, no longer kindly, leaning forward with his face twisted into something monstrous as blue-white bolts poured from his fingers. For the briefest instant, Fox froze. The Chancellor's eyes snapped toward him, and in those eyes Fox saw a depth of hunger that had nothing to do with politics. "Drop your weapon!" Fox shouted, and his voice echoed strangely in the ruined room. "Chancellor Palpatine, you are under arrest." Palpatine's lightning faltered, just a fraction. A surprise flashed across his ravaged face. It was gone almost instantly, replaced by rage. "You!" Palpatine hissed, as if the word itself were an insult. "You dare!" Fox troopers poured in behind him, blasters trained on Palpatine's body. Their helmets did not tilt. Their hands did not tremble. They moved like men who had been waiting for this their entire lives without knowing it. Mace Windu's eyes flicked toward them, and in that glance Fox saw something like astonishment. The Jedi Master had expected betrayal. Instead, he had been given reinforcements. Anakin Skywalker appeared in the doorway, drenched from rain, breathing hard. His eyes took in the scene, the lightning, the smoke, the clone blasters aimed at the Chancellor, and his face went white. "Anakin!" Palpatine rasped, and the old warmth tried to crawl back into his voice like a mask being pulled on in haste. "Help me! The Jedi are taking over." Mace's voice cut through it like steel. "He is the Sith Lord, Anakin." Anakin's gaze darted to Palpatine. To Fox, to the dead Jedi on the floor. The world seemed to tilt around him, not from physical instability but from the collapse of everything he had believed. Palpatine's face contorted again, and the lightning surged, striking Mace harder, pushing him toward the broken window. "He's a traitor!" Palpatine shrieked. "They're all traitors!" Fox's chip screamed inside his skull. "Threat! Threat! Threat!" Fox fired. Not at Palpatine's heart. Fox forced his hand, forced the bolt low, aiming for the shoulder. The shot struck Palpatine's robe and exploded in a flare of light. Palpatine howled, stumbling back a step. The lightning snapped off. For a heartbeat, the room was silent except for rain tapping the window and the hum of Mace's saber. Then Palpatine moved. He did not move like a politician, or even like an old man. He moved like a predator, and the Force seemed to coil around him like wings. He leapt, straight at the clones, with a scream that was pure hatred. Fox barely had time to shout before Palpatine's blade flashed red again, and the first trooper fell, armor split, blood steaming on white plates. Anakin's hands rose, lightsaber igniting with a desperate snap hiss. And in that moment, the choice arrived, not as philosophy, not as doctrine, but as a simple, brutal truth. The monster was real, and it was killing his soldiers. Anakin lunged. His blade met Palpatine's with a crack that shook the air. Blue and red light collided, throwing harsh color across faces slick with sweat and rain. For an instant, Anakin felt the full weight of Palpatine's strength, not in muscle, but in will. It was like trying to parry a storm. Palpatine's eyes burned and his voice was a snarl. "You were meant to be mine." Anakin gritted his teeth, pushing back. "You lied to me." "I offered you truth," Palpatine hissed, and then his saber flicked, impossibly quick, aimed for Anakin's throat. Anakin barely blocked. The impact jolted his arms. He felt his old fear rise, fear of loss, fear of weakness, and he forced it down, not by denying it, but by choosing something else. A clone screamed. Another fell. Fox heard his troopers dying, and the sound nearly cracked him in half. He fired again and again, bolts splashing against Palpatine's deflected blade, forcing the Sith to split his attention. Mace Windu staggered, one knee on the floor, his face strained. The lightning burn on his sleeve smoked. Yet his eyes remained clear, focused. He rose again, purple blade snapping up. Together, Jedi and clones and the young man caught between. They pressed Palpatine toward the shattered window. Palpatine's lips peeled back. "This is treason," he spat, voice rising into that familiar theatricality, as if the Senate might hear him and applaud. Fox barked a laugh that sounded like pain. "You don't get to call it that." For a heartbeat, Anakin saw it. Palpatine not as mentor, not as savior, but as a man cornered. A man who had expected everyone in the room to kneel. Palpatine's free hand snapped out, not lightning this time, but a raw shove of the Force. Furniture flew. A desk slammed into clones, crushing armor, driving men into the wall with sickening force. Anakin stumbled, caught himself, then drove forward again, blade slicing through the debris. He moved like he had on battlefields, like he had when his life had been simple. Protect, survive, win. Mace joined him, their sabers forming a brief, deadly harmony. Blue and purple, crossing, cutting. Palpatine snarled and retreated another step, heels near the broken edge, rain spraying in, city lights glittering behind him like a jeweled abyss. For one brief, terrifying moment, Anakin thought, "We can end it here." Then Palpatine's eyes flicked past them, toward the open office doors, toward the corridor beyond, toward the entire building full of soldiers whose minds were being rewritten in real time. And he smiled. "You think you've won," he whispered. "You have only opened the cage." Palpatine threw himself backward into the storm, disappearing into the night beyond the window like a shadow cast free. Anakin surged forward, reaching out with the Force, too late. The rain swallowed him. Fox ran to the window, visor splattered with blood and water, and stared out at Coruscant's endless tears. Somewhere out there, the Sith Lord was loose, and the order he had spoken was still echoing through the clone army like a struck bell. Dawn came grudgingly, as if Coruscant itself was reluctant to see what the night had done. The storm broke into thin, tattered clouds, and pale light spilled between the towers, turning whetstone into silver. Sirens wailed in distant tears. Traffic lanes were slowed, rerouted, watched by hovering patrols. The Senate district, usually so polished, felt raw. Like a palace after an assassination attempt, servants whispering, guards doubled at every door. Anakin stood on a balcony overlooking the complex, rain still clinging to his hair. His hands shook faintly, not from cold, but from the aftermath of battle and revelation. He could still feel Palpatine's presence in the Force like a smear of oil on water, gone from sight, not gone from reality. Commander Fox stood nearby, helmet tucked under one arm. Without it, he looked younger than Anakin expected, a man shaped by war, but still unmistakably human. His eyes were bloodshot. He stared at his own hands as if surprised to find them still attached. "I felt it," Fox said hoarsely. "The order. It tried to pull me. It tried to make me." His voice broke, and he swallowed hard. But then it turned, like it knew something I didn't. Mace Windu approached, moving slowly, one arm held close where the lightning had burned him. He looked like a man who had walked through fire and refused to bow. His gaze swept over the gathered clones on the balcony, troopers with white armor stained dark, men standing in uneasy clusters alongside Jedi Knights, who kept their sabers unlit but their eyes sharp. "You resisted," Mace said to Fox. Fox's jaw tightened. "I obeyed," he corrected, bitter. "Just not him." Anakin flinched. The word obeyed scraped against something in him. He thought of Dooku's head. He thought of Palpatine's voice in his ear. He thought of how easily obedience became sin. Below, in a secured courtyard, medics moved among injured clones. Jedi healers knelt beside them, hands glowing faintly. The sight should have been ordinary, Jedi aiding soldiers, but it carried a weight that made Anakin's throat tighten. These men had been bred as tools, and now they had bled to stop the hand that wielded them. Yoda arrived quietly, cane tapping, eyes heavy. He looked at the alliance forming in the gray morning light and exhaled as if releasing a breath he had held for years. "Qui-Gon was right," Yoda murmured, so softly only Anakin caught it. Anakin turned. "Master?" Yoda's gaze met his, and in it Anakin saw sorrow and warning and a strange, fragile hope. "Chosen you may still be," Yoda said. "But easy it will not be." Anakin looked out over Coruscant's endless tiers, over the city that had nearly become an empire overnight. He could feel the galaxy trembling, unsure which way it would fall. Palpatine was gone. Darth Sidious was loose. The war was not ended. The Jedi were wounded. The Senate was terrified. The clone army, vast, obedient, newly awake, stood at a precipice with their blasters still warm. Anakin thought of Padme, alone in their apartment, waiting. He thought of the child fluttering beneath her hands. He thought of a future that had been rewritten in blood and rain. Behind him, Fox straightened, eyes clearing with resolve that looked almost like grief turned into steel. "Give us the target," Fox said. "We'll bring him in." Macy's gaze hardened. "He won't come quietly." Anakin's hands curled into fists. The sun lifted higher, weak but real, and its light struck the white armor of the clones until they glowed like a line of ghosts. Anakin whispered, not to the masters or the soldiers, but to the Force itself, to whatever fragile thread of destiny still held. "Then we don't stop." And far away, deep in the city's shadowed arteries, something ancient and furious smiled in the dark. Because a plan could fail, but a monster did not stop being a monster just because it had been exposed.